Hello, dear friend. Have you ever woken up in the morning and felt like your own body was holding you hostage? Like every step you take carries the weight of all the years you've lived? Don't worry, I'm here to share you a story of a person who defeated this type of condition. A few months ago, I met a man named James O'Connor at a small park in Boston. He was sitting on a bench, shoes off, rubbing his legs slowly like he was trying to coax life back into them. We got to talking, and the story he told me that afternoon has stayed with me ever since. You see, James had spent more than 40 years as a mailman, walking miles every single day through rain, snow, and blazing summers. His legs were his livelihood, until the pain in his knees and feet grew so bad he could barely make it from his porch to the mailbox. Doctors called it just aging. But James said it felt like his body was giving up on him before he was ready to stop living. Yet what struck me most wasn't his pain. It was his hope. He told me, "I just knew there had to be something out there. Something that could give me my legs back." And what he found, by pure chance, did exactly that. It wasn't surgery. It wasn't some miracle drug. It was something simple. Something that started working almost immediately. Have you ever felt trapped inside your own pain? If so, this story might speak to you. Share your thoughts in the comments. You're not alone. But before I tell you about the remedy that changed James's life, let's go back and see how he reached that point. What he did and what he didn't do. And if you believe everyone deserves a second chance at good health, make sure to subscribe, because this story will remind you that healing doesn't always come from a pill, but from persistence. James O'Connor was born on a gray, windy morning in 1957, in a small Boston neighborhood where everyone knew each other by name. His father, Patrick, worked long shifts at the docks, and his mother, Ellen, ran the household with the kind of quiet strength only Irish women of her generation seemed to have. They didn't have much, but as James liked to say, what we lacked in money, we made up for in laughter. As a boy, James was full of energy, always running, climbing, and exploring. He loved the sound of his own footsteps echoing on the cracked sidewalks, pretending he was a hero on a great adventure. His mother would often shout from the porch, "Jimmy, slow down before you wear those shoes out." But he never did. Even then, he found peace in movement, in feeling the ground beneath him. School wasn't easy for him. He wasn't the smartest kid in class, but he was curious. He'd spend hours watching the postman walk down their street, fascinated by how steady and dependable the man seemed. Rain or shine, he always came. One day, young James told his father, "I think I want to do that when I grow up." His dad smiled, ruffling his hair, and said, "A good man keeps his word and his feet moving, son. You'll do just fine." Those early years shaped him. He learned the value of hard work from his father, patience from his mother, and a quiet pride from watching ordinary people do extraordinary things in small ways. Every corner of that old neighborhood held a memory. The corner store, the schoolyard fights, the smell of bread from Mrs. Malone's bakery. Looking back, James often said, "That was the best training for the life I'd end up living. Walking miles a day, delivering mail, and learning that every step counts, no matter how small." As James entered his teenage years, the quiet Boston boy with scraped knees and wild curiosity began to change. The world around him felt bigger, louder. The 1970s brought rock music, social shifts, and a new sense of freedom. But for James, it also brought confusion. His father's strict discipline clashed with his growing desire to make his own choices. He remembered the arguments that filled their small kitchen. Patrick wanted James to finish school and find something steady, while James just wanted to figure out who he was. He loved to walk. Long walks at night through the city streets, hands in pockets, mind full of dreams that didn't quite have shape yet. Sometimes He'd stop by the harbor and watch the ships, wondering what it would feel like to leave and start fresh somewhere else. But life had a way of keeping him grounded. His first job was at a corner grocery, stacking shelves after school. He earned barely enough to buy a new pair of sneakers, but the pride he felt was priceless. It was the first time he learned what independence really meant. At 17, tragedy struck. His mother fell ill. A quiet, lingering sickness that took her strength away little by little. James spent evenings helping around the house, watching the woman who once ran the world with her hands grow frail. It was during those months that he began to understand what responsibility truly meant, and how fragile time could be. When she passed, something changed in him. He stopped drifting. He wanted to make her proud. He promised himself that whatever he did in life, he'd do it with heart, just like she had. That promise would guide him for decades to come, through every step, every struggle, and every mile he'd one day walk. In his early 20s, James was a man trying to find his footing in a world that didn't wait for anyone. After high school, he skipped college, not because he lacked ambition, but because he needed to work. His father's health was fading, and the bills didn't stop coming. He took a job at the U.S. Postal Service, sorting letters in the back of a Boston facility. At first, it was just a job, a paycheck. But when the chance came to train as a mail carrier, something clicked. Walking through the neighborhoods, meeting people, bringing them little pieces of life in an envelope, it gave him purpose. He said it made him feel connected, like every route was a thread tying him to the city he loved. One morning, on his route, he met Laura, a young nurse with kind eyes and a laugh that made him forget how tired he was. She lived in a small brick apartment on Hanover Street. It started with short chats, then longer ones, then coffee after work. Within a year, they were inseparable. He often said, "She made me believe that love wasn't something you find, it's something you earn every day." But dreams rarely come without detours. His father passed suddenly just months before their wedding. The loss hit him harder than he expected. He buried himself in work, walking longer routes, taking extra shifts, anything to keep moving. Still, Laura stood by him. They married in a small church, surrounded by friends and the sound of rain tapping on the windows. James always said that day felt like a promise, not of a perfect life, but of a shared one. He didn't know it then, but those long walks, those long days, they were the beginning of both his greatest joy and the pain that would one day almost take it all away. Marriage brought a new rhythm to James's life, one filled with laughter, long work days, and the comforting chaos of building a home from scratch. He and Laura moved into a modest two-bedroom house on the outskirts of Boston. The walls were thin, the roof leaked when it rained, but to them, it was paradise. "We built our life one paycheck and one prayer at a time," James would say with a grin. He threw himself into his work as a mail carrier. Rain, snow, or shine, he delivered letters with a smile. His customers became like family. The elderly woman on Elm Street who baked him cookies every Christmas. The young couple who named their baby after his route number as a joke. His steps became part of the heartbeat of that neighborhood. Then came the day Laura handed him a tiny white envelope. Inside was a note that simply read, "You're going to be a dad." He still remembered dropping to his knees, unable to speak, his calloused hands shaking as tears welled up. When Emily was born, and later Sean, life took on a new meaning. Every mile he walked at work, every ache in his legs, became worth it because of them. But balancing duty and dreams wasn't easy. There were nights when he came home too tired to eat, his legs throbbing, his uniform soaked from the rain. Laura would rub his knees with warm towels, whispering, "You're doing enough, Jimmy." He'd just nod, knowing deep down he wished he could give her more. Still, Their little family thrived. Sunday pancakes, bike rides, bedtime stories. Those were the golden years when love filled the gaps that money couldn't. Yet even in those happy times, life was quietly saving its biggest test for him, one that would stretch far beyond his endurance. The late 1990s brought a wave of change, some good, some cruel. The kids were growing fast, bills were piling higher, and the long postal routes were wearing on James's body. The job he once loved began to take its toll. His knees started to swell, his feet burned by the end of each shift, but he kept pushing through. "It's just part of getting older," he'd tell Laura, though deep down he feared it was more than that. Then came the layoffs. Automation, new routes, budget cuts, the words no working man wanted to hear. James kept his position, but many of his friends didn't. Survivor's guilt hit him hard. He took on extra hours, determined not to fall behind, even as his health began to crack under the pressure. In 2005, tragedy came again. Laura's sudden illness, a quiet, relentless battle that ended far too soon, left him hollow. She had been his anchor through every storm, and without her, life lost its color. "I delivered letters for 40 years, he once told me softly, but losing her, that was the one delivery I never came back from." Grief reshaped him. He kept working, kept walking, but his steps were heavier. The house that once echoed with laughter became unbearably quiet. His daughter had moved to Chicago. His son was in the Navy, and James, alone with his pain, learned how silence could weigh as much as a mountain. That's when the real cracks started to show. His knees buckled more often, his feet cramped at night, and climbing stairs became a small war. Still, he refused to stop, because for James, stopping meant surrender. And surrender was never in his blood. He didn't know it then, but this season of hardship would be the start of a long climb, one that would test not just his body, but his faith in healing itself. By his 50s, James O'Connor had become something of a legend in his postal district. Rain or shine, snow or sleet, the man was unstoppable. Younger carriers admired him, old-timers respected him, and the people on his route treated him like family. Kids waved when they saw his blue truck, and elderly neighbors waited for him just to share a few words. The Postal Service recognized his dedication more than once. 30 years of perfect attendance, the plaque read. James laughed when he got it, saying, "Guess that means I just didn't know when to quit." But behind that humor, there was a growing cost. Every morning, he'd wake up with knees that crackled like dry twigs and feet that felt heavy as bricks. The pain crept in slowly, the way rust eats through iron. Quiet, persistent, inevitable. Still, he refused to slow down. He told himself it was pride, but it was really fear. Fear of stopping. Fear of finding out what was left when the work ended. His body paid the price. Doctors warned him about inflammation, early arthritis, worn-out joints, but James brushed it off. "I've walked through worse," he'd say. In 2012, the local paper featured him in an article titled "The Man Who Never Missed a Route." He kept the clipping framed in his hallway. It made him proud, but it also made him ache inside, because every time he looked at it, he remembered what it took. Missed family dinners, pain-filled nights, and a wife who had once begged him to rest. Success had its shine, but it came with shadows. And as retirement loomed closer, James began to feel something unfamiliar. Not accomplishment, but emptiness. For the first time in his life, he began to wonder, what happens when the walking stops? When his 60th birthday rolled around, James didn't feel old. He felt used up. The long years of service had worn grooves into his body and spirit. His mailbag felt heavier than ever, though the letters inside hadn't changed. He started noticing how the world around him was speeding up while he was slowing down. The younger carriers had smartphones, GPS routes, and lightweight carts. They finished faster, complained less. James still did things the old way, walking house to house, shaking hands, remembering birthdays, carrying dog biscuits in his pocket for the neighborhood pets. He was a living reminder of a time when life moved slower, and maybe kinder. His daughter Emily would visit sometimes with her kids, begging him to retire. "Dad, you've done enough walking for 10 lifetimes," she'd laugh. But James couldn't imagine a life without his uniform. "What would I even do all day?" he'd joke, though the truth was the idea of stopping scared him. Yet in quiet moments, he began to feel the shift. Old friends were retiring, others passing away. The city routes he once knew like the back of his hand were changing. New apartments, fewer letters, more silence. And with each change, a little part of him faded too. Then, one winter morning, he slipped on a patch of ice delivering mail. It wasn't a bad fall, but it shook him to his core. The ache in his knees never fully left after that. For the first time, James realized he couldn't outrun time. That spring, after 42 years of walking, he hung up his postal bag for the last time. The applause at his retirement party was loud, but inside, he felt something quiet and heavy. A question that echoed in his heart. If I'm not walking anymore, who am I now? Retirement sounded peaceful on paper. No alarm clocks, no long routes, no heavy bags digging into his shoulder. But for James O'Connor, it felt like stepping into silence after a lifetime of motion. A silence that was almost too loud. The first few months, he tried to enjoy it. Morning coffee on the porch, watching the neighborhood kids ride their bikes, catching Red Sox games on TV. But soon, he started noticing something unsettling. The pain wasn't going away. In fact, it was getting worse. His knees throbbed like old engines, his calves tightened after short walks, and his feet would spasm at night so sharply it brought tears to his eyes. At first, he brushed it off. "Just old bones," he'd tell Emily on the phone. But one afternoon, he tried to walk down to the park, barely half a mile, and had to stop 3 times just to rest. The same man who once walked 12 miles a day could now barely make it past his street corner. Loneliness made it worse. The laughter and chatter from his mail routes had been replaced by the ticking of the kitchen clock. He tried joining a senior walking group, but even then, he fell behind after just a few blocks. He began declining invitations, ashamed of how much he struggled. One night, after another sleepless evening filled with leg cramps, James stared at his old mail carrier shoes tucked under the bed, soles worn smooth from decades of service. He whispered to himself, "You carried me all my life. Now I can't even carry myself." That was the moment he realized this wasn't just about pain. It was about losing his independence, the one thing he'd always taken pride in. And before long, that realization would bring him face to face with the lowest point of his life. The day he almost gave up on walking altogether. It happened on a cold February morning. Boston streets were slick with frost, and James had promised himself he'd make it to the corner store. It wasn't far, a few hundred steps, but by the time he reached halfway, the pain in his legs flared so fiercely he had to grab a fence just to stay standing. Every step felt like fire. His knees buckled, his calves cramped, and a sharp spasm shot through his feet. He leaned against a lamppost, breathing hard, embarrassed as strangers passed by. "You all right, sir?" someone asked, but James could only nod, forcing a weak smile. When he finally made it home, he sank into his chair and stayed there the entire day. He didn't eat, didn't turn on the TV, just sat in silence, staring at his legs as if they belonged to someone else. That night, he told Emily on the phone, "Maybe I'm just done walking, sweetheart. Maybe this is what getting old feels like." She didn't say anything for a moment, just cried softly. Over the next few weeks, things got worse. The pain was constant. He He used a cane, then a walker. He stopped going outside altogether. Depression crept in, quiet but heavy. The man who once carried letters across cities now struggled to carry himself across a room. The final straw came when he tried to get his mail one morning and slipped on the porch. He wasn't badly hurt, but lying there, staring up at the gray sky, he felt something break inside. Not a bone, something deeper. Hope. That evening, as he sat at his kitchen table rubbing his swollen knees, he whispered to himself, "I can't live like this anymore." He didn't know it yet, but that moment, that breaking point, would soon lead him to something unexpected. A chance encounter, a simple suggestion, and a remedy that would change everything. A few days after that fall, James reluctantly agreed to meet an old friend from his postal days, Frank Delaney, another retired carrier who had gone through his own battle with joint pain. They met at a small diner on the corner of Tremont Street, the kind of place where the coffee's always hot and the waitresses call you on. When Frank walked in, James noticed something right away. The man looked different, lighter on his feet, his posture straighter, his energy back. It had only been 6 months since they last saw each other, but the change was striking. "Frank," James said, squinting, "you look 10 years younger. What did you do, make a deal with the devil?" Frank laughed, shook his head, and leaned closer. "Nah, Jimmy, I just started listening to my legs." He went on to explain that a few months ago, he discovered something simple yet powerful, a natural anti-inflammatory routine combining turmeric and magnesium supplements, gentle stretching therapy, and a circulation foot soak that used Epsom salts and apple cider vinegar. "Sounds like one of those old wives' tales, right?" Frank said. "But the stuff works." James was skeptical. He'd heard it all before. Pills, creams, miracle devices. But Frank pulled out his phone and showed him an article from the Arthritis Foundation, explaining how curcumin, the active compound in turmeric, has been clinically shown to reduce joint inflammation and stiffness in older adults. Another study from Harvard Health highlighted the role of magnesium in muscle recovery and cramp prevention. That night, James went home and couldn't stop thinking about it. If it worked for him, he thought, maybe I've still got a shot. The next morning, he made his way, slowly, painfully, to the local health store. He bought everything Frank mentioned, and that very evening he began what he'd later call the comeback walk. He didn't know it yet, but the healing had already begun. Not just in his body, but in his heart. James started small, real small. The first night, he sat at his kitchen table with a bowl of warm water, apple cider vinegar, and Epsom salts. As his feet soaked, he felt the heat seep into his tired muscles like a long-forgotten comfort. "It's strange," he told Emily on the phone, "but it feels like my legs are sighing in relief." Each morning, he took his turmeric capsule with breakfast, 2 soft-boiled eggs and a cup of tea. In the evenings, he took magnesium before bed to ease the nightly cramps. But the real change came when he added a gentle stretching routine. 10 minutes a day. Nothing fancy, just slow, mindful movements he learned from a YouTube physical therapist specializing in senior mobility. At first, progress was slow. The pain didn't vanish overnight. But by the second week, he noticed something new. He could walk across the kitchen without clutching the counter. By the third week, he made it to the mailbox and back. It was only a few dozen steps, but for James, it felt like a marathon. Encouraged, he kept going. The soaks, the supplements, the stretches, they became his daily ritual, as steady as his old postal routes. By the second month, his swelling had eased, and his steps were smoother. "It's like my legs are waking up again," he told Frank one morning over coffee. And perhaps, most importantly, his spirit changed. The hopelessness that once sat heavy in his chest began to lift. He smiled more, slept better, and started visiting the park again, where he'd first told his story. If you've ever tried something simple that made a big difference, He said to me later, "You know the feeling. Like your body's finally remembering how to live again." He wasn't just walking again. He was living again, one careful, grateful step at a time. It's been 2 years since that cold February morning when James thought he'd never walk freely again. Today, you can find him most mornings at Boston Common, strolling at his own pace, a soft smile under his gray mustache, hands tucked in his jacket pockets. He doesn't walk fast anymore, but every step means something. His routine has become second nature. Every sunrise begins with a turmeric capsule and warm lemon water. After breakfast, a 10-minute stretch by the window. By afternoon, a slow walk through the park. No cane, no walker, just rhythm and breath. At night, he still soaks his feet in that same bowl of Epsom salts and apple cider vinegar. "It's not magic," he says. "It's consistency." That's where the healing hides. The transformation isn't just physical. His confidence returned, his laughter too. He started volunteering at the post office's community desk, mentoring new carriers, young men who remind him of himself decades ago. Sometimes he jokes, "If I can outwalk the pain, you can outwork the excuses." One afternoon, as we sat together watching the ducks by the pond, I asked him what he'd learned through it all. He smiled quietly, his eyes following the ripples in the water. "I wish I'd listened to my body sooner," he said. "It was whispering for years before it started to scream. But I'm grateful I finally did, because the second chance I got feels even better than the first." James's story isn't just about a remedy. It's about faith, patience, and learning that healing often begins the moment you stop giving up. If this story inspired you, like this video, and if you believe in second chances, subscribe. You never know whose story might help you take your first step toward feeling alive again. You know, every person I meet teaches me something about life, and James reminded me that it's never too late. Not to heal, not to change, not to start again. Pain has a way of making us feel small, but sometimes all it takes is a little faith, a little patience, and the courage to try one more thing. So if you're listening to this right now, don't give up on your body. It's still got more life in it than you think. Thanks for listening, my friends. Until next time, stay healthy, stay hopeful, and keep walking your path.